the 21st century. Hard-working people working hard for you and me. Moving higher, time and time again. Through the years you'll find us here. Moving higher.
Hello and welcome to Moving Iron Podcast. Markets with Shawn Hackett. This edition of the Moving Iron Podcast is brought to you by Axon Tire, helping dealers move more iron for the past 100 years. For more information, go to axontire.com. Also, Arrow, if you're looking for a great place to find some products that will help your salespeople sell more stuff, check out heyarrow.com and you'll find all the information you need there. Shawn is with Hackett Financial out of Boca Raton, Florida, and Shawn's nice enough to come on a couple times a week to talk about what's going on in the markets. And plenty of stuff going on here, Shawn. You put out a new smart money report that came out, I think yesterday or the day before, and I had a chance to listen to the podcast that was associated with that this morning when I was doing my exercising, and I saw that you were talking about the climate, and which anytime you talk about the climate, I make sure to listen to that. But we've talked about it, kind of what we think the winter's going to look like, a million times on here and what that looks like. But there's one thing inside of that report on that podcast that really caught my attention. And it was, you're talking about UV strength and solar radiation, solar winds, and those kind of things, which made me think back to when I was a kid, when we'd play football and it was cold outside, and we would take our hands and we would kind of put them up to the sun, and you put your hands up to the sun and it would warm them up. You'd actually physically feel the heat from the sun on your hands. And if I understood correctly, that power or that heat or whatever you want to call it, that's coming from the sun during this time frame, because of the diminished UV rays, it won't be as much power coming through that. So it's naturally just going to make it kind of cooler out, I guess.
Well, yeah, the grand solar cycle is comprised of two components. One is lower sunspots in general, meaning less energy going out to the atmosphere coming into Earth. That's the first thing. The second thing is that the actual solar wind, they actually measure this. It's like the wind in a given day, 15 knots or 20 knots or miles per hour, however you're looking at it. That solar wind actually is reduced. So whatever sunspots we do have, the energy from those sunspots is not hitting the Earth in the same intensity as it would if we were operating normally. And that has to do with the orientation of the sun, or as it rotates around its barycenter. We've talked about this a lot, how that's driven by the positioning of the planets. It has to do with the magnetic, gravimetric, and electric forces of the planets as they rotate in certain orientations. And when they get into a certain specific period of time, it reduces or it pushes back on those solar winds. And so we showed a chart on our podcast, Casey, as I think you're referring to, where our sunspots right now relative to last solar cycle are fairly similar from the trough to the current moment, but that the UV radiation in the atmosphere is way off. Like we're way underperforming the last solar cycle 24. So that's consistent with the idea that that even with a similar sunspot activity, we're actually getting lower energy hitting the atmosphere. And that's a trend we think is going to continue to impact our weather more and more over time.
Right on. Because that makes a lot of sense. Like you'd have the sunniest of days, but just don't have the same level of energy hitting the Earth. So therefore it's not going to be as warm, deal. So that makes a lot of sense. And this is a big deal. You've talked about, going into September, into October, and then especially moving into October or November, what that looks like. And here we are in the middle of October, and it's not uncommon for there to be snow here in the Panhandle of Nebraska in the middle of October. But this snow event that's coming here across the high plains and the northern latitudes of the U.S. seems like it's going to be kind of every day gets to be a bigger deal than it was the day before. So I guess talk about this weather pattern that we're seeing coming right now.
Well, just remember the consensus opinion just 2 weeks ago from almost everyone, I'm sure there was somebody else, was that the drought in the West was going to continue
forever. The way I understood it.
It's the La Nina's back, which of course no one predicted everyone said it was gone, and that we, as you know, we're strongly suggesting a double dip La Nina.
Right.
But that, the drought's going to continue. And of course, now we're getting, in excess of 3 foot of snow in a lot of different, mountain ranges, and heavy snowfall. And then behind this winter storm, we're going to get flooding rains in California, in Oregon, and in Washington state. The epicenter, the poster children for the drought, like flooding rains, mudslide kind of rains. That's going to start to gravitate towards, further into the west. And now all of a sudden, all the weathermen are beginning to, they didn't see it coming. We got to alter our forecast. The drought's going to go away. This is going to be a drought easing winter. If anything, excessive snowpack could cause flooding. We think the biggest problem, as we've talked about before, is that there's going to be a lot of flooding in the U.S. during the planting season from snowpack melt. But the West's drought's going to ease substantially. That's very good news, by the way. In aggregate, much better news to have the drought ease and any flooding concerns. And so that part of the forecast, highly contrarian, by the way, is consistent with the La Nina Mordecai, and it's consistent with this lower energy hitting the atmosphere that causes this meridional jet stream, this undulating jet stream that allows for these amplified patterns like we're starting to see here, that just 2 weeks ago, no one forecasted. No one forecasted this was going to happen out west. And all of a sudden, oh my gosh, look what just happened. Did they all get blindsided by it? And this is going to be a consistent feature throughout the winter. We're going to get these repeated cyclogenesis, bombogenesis kind of almost winter hurricanes, you almost call them. We've seen them before. So it's a teaser. What's going out west is a teaser for what happens when winter really gets going, as we've been forecasting by mid-November onward. But it's a good reminder of what's to come and how the current weather models and the conventional way of looking at weather simply are not going to be able to see this come. They're not going to be able to, they're only going to see it coming when it's on top of you already. And our job, as you know, as price forecasters, is to see it come before it does, so we can help our customers take action when the action is good, not after it's already happened. So
I know out here, we're having our typical change of weather. This is the same pattern that you would see during any winter storm that comes through. 2 days beforehand, there's high winds. I think today's high wind warning. So, it could be anywhere between 35 to 60 mile an hour wind gust type of thing all day long. And then it'll kind of calm down tomorrow. And that's when it's supposed to start. And then, we've got some cool temperatures. I think the lows are anywhere from, 28 to 32 for the next 2 or 3 nights. If I remember right, I could go back and look at my forecast, but it's a typical winter weather pattern that you normally see out here. So it's definitely, it's on top of us, I guess, now. So they can forecast, that it's going to happen, I guess. So.
Yeah, they can get the 1 day to 2 day forecast correctly, maybe.
Yeah, it's going to be windy. All right, right on. Shocker.
Wait, they're going to look outside. Oh, it's snowing. We think it's going to snow.
Yeah, that's about how it works. That's exactly about how it works.
I know.
All right. So let's talk about inside that same podcast. You talked about the cattle market a little bit, and you had some pretty strong smart algorithm low points pop up there for buying cycle coming up. So talk about that a little bit. What you see happening there?
Yeah, we create this insider capital flow smart money algorithm that is really structured to measure when there's big changes, either selling or buying in a particular market. We've identified DNA markers in each market that when we achieve buy levels to a certain level or sell levels to a certain level, they have tended to be important turning points in the market. The cattle market, we showed the feeder cattle market and we showed the live cattle market, both have shown not just buying, it's parabolic buying, panic buying in the last 3 to 4 weeks. Very unusual. It's just, you just don't typically see this happen very often unless there's a certain degree of urgency in the insiders of the particular market that you're in. Something has got them very excited that they don't want to wait to buy tomorrow or next week. And they want to buy now, and they want to buy strong, and they want to buy aggressively. And then of course, we always look for a chart pattern to verify, that the timing is getting good. And we've seen kind of what we call a double bottom pattern, that the second bottom was made early October. And then we actually went through the neckline. Not to get fancy, but that typically means double bottom completion. And in some kind of a right shoulder, higher low coming, and then the market heading off. So it looks to us, Casey, we've been looking for an October low. It looks to us like the low has been made in the cattle market. The chart pattern verifies it. The smart money verifies it. And so if I am a cattleman, if I'm a cattle producer and I'm, thinking about how I want to hedge, we would be light on hedging right now. We would be sitting back, let the market run. If you put a lot of hedges on, if you made a lot of cash sales already, maybe there's some things you can do to counteract those hedges to kind of protect them to the upside. Of course, if you're a buyer of cattle, if you're JBS, not that JBS listens to me, but if you're JBS, maybe they ought to, up the ante a little bit and bring some more animals in. So this would be a time to be looking for an important low in this market. And we're pretty excited that is starting to develop here. So better times ahead, we think, from here into the end of the year for cattle ranchers.
All right. So let's jump over and talk about what's going on with corn and soybeans. We've talked about the natural gas thing last week and kind of some of the stuff we see there. As you take a look at moving forward, now everyone's claiming around that there's going to be so much more soybeans because of the last of the report last week and what we saw there, and it's just going to be just this big monumental carry out of soybeans. I guess as you look forward into 22 in that planting cycle and what that looks like, especially with the issues that we're going to see, assuming everything continues in the same path that we're going with planting, delays and replant and all the different stuff that comes into that and prevent plant, those kind of things. And then throw on top of that, the price of fertilizer and those kind of things. Could you see some kind of record price in soybeans and a record acres planted in soybeans and less corn being planted and basically, soybeans kind of filling that void that from, the lack of corn that we see, and then kind of leveling stuff out a little bit? I mean, I guess, what are your thoughts there?
Well, first of all, the USDA report comes out today. I never try to predict how the market will react to anything other than people are pretty bearish heading in this report. Maybe you get a bounce today, but short term, we do think beans need to go under 12 to factor in a larger crop. Now, South America, that's the next thing we look at, right?
Right.
Very, very good rainfall in Brazil. Totally different from last year. Part of our forecast that we talked about, Brazil drought going to end, Argentine drought going to continue to escalate. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. It's bearish for soybeans, right? Because they're going to grow another huge crop. At the same time, if we have an historic drought in Argentina, then they're going to have a much smaller crop. And the bean meal, bean oil constituents that they sell are going to be way down, which would be bullish for soybeans. So I think you got to think of soybeans as a yin and a yang. They're going to overshoot to the downside here, Casey, on bearish weather in Brazil and an increase in the carry out here in the US. But then they're going to start to say, wait a minute, Argentina's looking really bad. Maybe we overdid this. They're going to have a sizable bounce. Now, no one's going to believe my forecast for next spring, because it's so outlandish. No one's going to be trading my forecast because they only trade it after it's obvious it's going to happen. But the way that we see it happening, that even though it's going to be delayed planting, late planting, replanting, all the things that will promote more soybean acres and less corn acres, we still don't believe all the soybean acres that want to get planted are going to get planted. So we think if we think out loud to the planting intentions report in late March of next year, we could see the USDA project a record number of soybean acres that are wanting to get planted. Okay. And I would imagine that a late start to the planting season, everyone will assume even more acres are going to get planted. But then it's going to come a point that the planting season is going to be so disruptive with everything we just talked about, late ending winter, late freezes, lots and lots of flooding, that they're going to say, you know what, we're not going to get all the soybean acres in. And so we're going to have to dial that back. So I think soybeans it's a late spring story. Corn, it's an early spring story. Winter wheat, it's a late winter story because the post dormancy for winter wheat is going to be completely chaotic. So I kind of feel that the soybean market's going to be the last one to make a move on this crazy weather we're looking at. But when it finally does, it's going to be pretty powerful. But we think it's going to be a trader's market more than it is going to be a trending market. We think the winter wheat market can be a trending market. We think the corn market can be a trending market. Longer term, let's just get beyond this next growing cycle, though. Remember that renewable diesel is a big trend that doesn't look like it's going to go away for the next 2 to 3 years. Big investments have been put into it. Big plants going to be opening up for it. And that's going to be needing lots and lots and lots of bean oil. If you just run the numbers alone, just what California is going to require for renewable diesel from bean oil, we would have to more than triple our current biodiesel output from soybeans. Oh, wow. So there's the short term, that we're dealing with. And then beyond that, we're going to have to plant, 5, 10, you can even argue 15 million more soybeans over the next 5 years to handle this renewable diesel demand that's coming in. And so there's a big, powerful, bullish long-term story once we get through this, a lot of these short-term bearish headwinds. So don't lose sight of the longer term. There's going to be a big move. And of course, what does that mean? Less corn acres, less wheat acres, less corn acres. So when you put it all together, if you look at a 2-year outlook, 3-year outlook, it's bullish grain markets overall. It's a timing issue though. Right now, I think soybeans is a trading market. And we as a hedger, we would treat it as such.
Gotcha. It's a, God dang, there's just a lot of moving parts right now. A lot of moving stuff going on. Well, Shawn, if folks want to reach out to you and get more information about Hackett Financial and what you can do for them, what's the best way to do that?
Our website is Hackett, HACKETT, advisors.com. We encourage everyone to listen to past interviews we've done with you that are on there, with Real Vision that are on there, Market to Market that are on there, our sample reports, white papers, to get a good idea of how we look at things might be of value to your listeners.
Yeah, it just there's just so much stuff to look at here. I mean, there's reports out now that, France is making another cut to its wheat crop estimate, and Russia's wheat exports are, up again for the 13th week. There's just so many little things that just drive the market back and forth.
Yeah, wheat's in big trouble. Wheat's in big trouble. And wait until we get to the spring and this post-dormancy thing doesn't work out. Yeah. It's going to be really rough. Yeah. Really rough. So
definitely reach out to Shawn, get his information, sign up for his newsletter, and get that information, because there's a lot of great information in there that you're not hearing anywhere else. So make sure you check that out. So, John, thanks for being on the podcast, man.
Thank you, Casey. Always a pleasure, and I look forward to doing this on Thursday.
Right. So. I'm Casey Seymour with Moving Iron Podcast. Make sure you check me out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. That's where you're going to find the latest edition of the Moving Iron Podcast. Also go to Moving Iron LLC, where you get all the information about the Moving Iron Podcast, as well as Moving Iron Summit. Look for that information to come out here in probably the next 30 days. We'll get that locked down. More than likely, I'll have Shawn come back and spread his joy through his great speeches that he puts out there. All the good news he likes to put out there on those things, but it's good information.
But remember, Casey, that I don't know when it's going to be, but and of course you don't have to keep having me. There's other people out there who are really smart, but we are going to be shifting towards El Nino. So everything's going to really, really shift. And so an El Nino in this environment means a whole lot of different things. So, we'll be shifting gears quite a bit as we move into the following growing cycle beyond this one. So, it'll be a totally new weather paradigm to be discussing, and totally different tentacles, that'll be popping up. So it'll be very different. It'll be a very different discussion than the one we're having right now when we go out and speak to everybody.
Yeah.
So.
The reason I like having Shawn Q coming back to do this, because I'm like, one of these days he's going to be wrong. And I'm going to catch him, and he's never wrong. So make sure you check him out.
I can be wrong on the periphery, and I will be wrong on the periphery, but I don't think I'm going to be wrong on the big picture. And that's really the key.
That's the
So,
key thing. It's the big picture part of it. That's what I'm talking about. So
yeah.
listen to Shawn, read his stuff, go out and just go check stuff out. Cause I'm telling you what you're hearing from Shawn when it comes to these weather patterns and these climate models and those kind of things. I watch a lot of news and I watch a lot of weather and I watch a lot of stuff like that. And the only time I hear this stuff is when on Tuesdays and Thursdays when Shawn Hackett's on Moving Iron Podcast. So make sure you check that out. So with that, I'm Casey Seymour with Shawn Hackett. Let's move some iron, folks. Out.
Moving iron in the 21st century. Hard work.